Welcome into the Pro Football Today post-game show, driven by Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio to run through this doubleheader tonight. Titans and Dolphins. That closes out with the Titans on top 31-12. Miami Dolphins tried to make some sort of push there, but there was some insane calls throughout this entire game. And, of course, it was a very slow one. It was a punt city party for majority of that first half and the third quarter, if we're being honest. Outside of that, you've got the Seahawks and the Lions that wrap up. Seahawks tried to make a push in their third quarter, but they fell short, coming out below 42-29 to the Detroit Lions. So plenty of things to get into, especially because halftime show, Tom, we were looking at Jameson. We were wondering if he was going to be able to hit those props for you, and boy, was he able to get it done with, what, a 70-yard touchdown? And look, guys, I'm going to humbly just brag that my card didn't do too shabby either. But let's start with the Dolphins versus the Titans. What did we take away from that matchup, Tom?
Oh, it's getting late early for the Dolphins. Their season is not looking good. And, Adam mentioned on the pregame show that Adam Schefter had mentioned that there are some reports that Tua Tagovailoa could be back by week 8. But we have to, think about, where are they going to be at week 8? Because they're sitting at 1-3 right now. Are they even, if they're 1-7 or 2-6, is it even worth to bring Tua back at that point? So it's tough to take any props on any of their players. I was very high on Devon Achane coming into tonight's game. If I remember correctly, Jalen Wright, he had 9 carries for them, and Achane had 10. And, I was very high on Achane over 13.5 carries. That didn't come through. I don't want to sit here and say, Achane should have had all 9 of those carries, therefore I would have been right. He would have cashed his bet. But there's just no consistency in the offense. And this is a very real, I don't want to say real reality, but the reality of the situation for the Dolphins is that if their team is a sinking ship, they're going to be shuffling players in and out. And Tyreek Hill may not be seeing as consistent snap rate or, routes run. And we're going to see less involvement from Jalen Waddle, and they're going to be in younger players. And that's the reality for the Dolphins at this point. From the Titans side, is Will Levis healthy? Is he going to be starting? They got good stuff out of Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard. Those are the shining bright lights for them, for the Titans, the 2 running backs, but not a whole lot from this game.
Absolutely. And I think it's safe to say it's getting really real for the Miami Dolphins. I think that's what you meant by realistic and real, but I totally agree. Not to mention is that this inconsistency that they have going on and just seem of a plan or lack thereof, it's causing some of their players to get pretty banged up. So we don't know what we're going to see come week 8. Not to mention we're not going to know who's going to be healthy to help this team try to dig themselves out of the hole come week 8. So a lot of question marks around the Miami Dolphins and their future thus far this season. But outside of that, Titans pick up their first W. We don't know if Levis was on the side because he was shaken up or they just wanted to move on past some of those mistakes. Regardless, Tom and I still got plenty to get into here on Pro Football Today, the post-game show. So stick with us as we hit this quick break, and then we catch you up on the other side.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards.
That was
thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
Brew Crew has already clinched the National League. Said They're 2 games behind LA, that being the Dodgers, trying to maybe get the 2nd seed in the National League standings for October.
Both of these teams have a chance to score some runs against these pitching matchups, so maybe another over, even though we do have a playoff atmosphere. And yes, Milwaukee did clinch, but there's still an eye on the prize of we might be able to chase down the Dodgers and also the Phillies to get one of those buys.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Dable has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Dable to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get Neighbors, and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into Pro Football Today. It's the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio as we run through this Monday night doubleheader. And in case you missed it, Titans come out on top 31-12 over the Dolphins, and what a slow first half that was. But look, Titans pull off their first W, so have at it for them. Then you've got the Detroit Lions that add a W to their column, winning 42-29. But there's probably some questions about how the Seahawks almost got back into this one. And of course, Tom and I have to break down what positives we saw in terms of the Seahawks. Are they really as fraudulent as some of us were questioning, or was this kind of a progressive play by them to say that they can compete in the NFL and kind of rise to the occasion? So circling back to the first game for just a little bit longer, Tom, because we were just talking about the fact that Dolphins don't really have a plan. They're talking about Tua potentially returning week 8. But on the other side of things, let's go to the team that finally gets their first W. You got Tony Pollard, and when you and I talked during halftime, you mentioned not to kind of get over the top here about his production with his team. Obviously, context that you added is that he had that big 40-yard rush and whatnot, but 88 yards is what he closes out with, rushing yards that is, through 22 carries and 1 touchdown. Is there maybe some life when it comes to the Titans on both sides of the ball, I guess we can ask?
Well, the one thing I'll note is that this game barely snuck over. If you had the under, which was sitting at 36 and a half, wild sequence to end there. So a backdoor over. So if you were on the under, that's unfortunate. But, Pollard should be the guy in essentially, I want to say like a 60-40 split when it comes to the backfield for the Titans, that he should be in the upper teens when it comes to total touches per game. Now, I would say this is maybe on the higher end, especially if Will Levis was out and maybe they would have thrown the ball a little bit more. He wouldn't have rushed as much. But this is the consistency that we can probably get. I would say the number one option from the Titans would be Tony Pollard, because we're not getting any consistency out of Calvin Ridley. We're not getting consistency out of Hopkins or Chigo Okonkwo, Tyler Boyd. The receivers are kind of a mess for the Titans, but Tyler Boyd and then Tajay Spears would probably be that 1 and 2 combo you could look to, especially just from the rushing plus receiving, and maybe nowhere else on the Titans offense.
Nice. I do agree with that. Now, pivoting over to where you and I found a little bit more success on the night, or a lot more success. You would go 3 for 3 on your card. I mentioned Jameson picking up that big 70-yard touchdown. I mean, we saw the Lions kind of come out swinging in that first half, and you guys kind of scripted it in the Pro Football Today pregame show. Dave, you, Adam, talking about what the script was going to look like for this team, running the ball in one half and then airing out that pass attack in the next half. You got Jared Goff that closes out the night, and most of this coming from the second half with 292 passing yards, 2 tutties, and by the way, a trick play from St. Brown and company. Then you got Gibbs and Montgomery. Gibbs leading the running back room, 78 rushing yards, 14 carries, 2 tutties himself. Montgomery picking up a touchdown in that first half. A lot of good things that we saw out of the Lions. So let's start with their side of the roster. What did we like? What was the biggest takeaways? And then let's get some bragging rights for this betting card you had tonight.
Yeah, a couple notes about just the game overall. The game total flew over. It was opened at 48.5, which I took under on 48.5, and then it closed about 46.5. So game total flies over. Lions team total flies over. Goff yards flies over. It's a Lions party tonight. That's what it was. So everything was moving for them. Good split in the backfield. Maybe not the biggest game from Amon-Ra St. Brown when it comes to the yards, 6 for 45 with the 1 touchdown in receiving touchdown and the passing touchdown. So good production from him. Obviously, Goff, 18 of 18, which is absolutely unbelievable. And then, Jameson Williams comes away with this super long reception, which is the, kind of key point that I made at the pregame show, what I talked about in the same game parlay, which did win the Lions money line. Jameson Williams to score a touchdown and Jameson Williams over 42.5 yards. I also mentioned as a separate prop, Jameson Williams over 20.5 for his longest reception. All of these things I want to say are highly correlated because that's the role he plays. He's that downfield threat. He's 2 catches. One was 10 yards and the other was 70 yards. That is his role. The underneath route comes to Sam Laporta, comes to Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's what we get from the Lions. So when we have teams that are healthy and we know the roles, we know exactly where to target them. So Jameson Williams is never going to be a player that I'm going to say, oh, I love him to have 6 receptions tonight. No, that's Amon-Ra St. Brown's role. We can look for the big yards from someone else. We can look to combine rushing like you had for Montgomery, rushing plus receiving. So the Lions are awesome. They're moving for the NFC Championship. They bring us exactly what we want from a betting perspective. It's all good things for Detroit right now. And the Tigers start a playoff series tomorrow.
I know, a lot of big things happening when it comes down for Detroit, but that was exciting also because we chatted about it during halftime, Tom, and we knew that Jared Goff's that guy who's going to find that big play eventually, and you've laid the foundation for the fact that Jameson Williams is that big play guy. So that cashed in beautifully, I am sure. And then, of course, as much as we joke around on the pregame show, I have my steady bets that aren't as wild as some of the other ones that go out there. So I did get Metcalf to go over 4.5 receptions, and then Sam Laporta is the only one that fell short. I had him for over 4.5 receptions. He closed the night at 4. You had at over 25.5 receiving yards. Right. Came in very narrow on that one, but regardless, I'll take what I can get as he picks up 26 receiving yards just through 2 receptions. I thought he was going to sit at that 1 reception and 16 yards for the rest of the night. David Montgomery, as Tom mentioned, I had him over 77.5 rush plus combined with receiving yards, and then Montgomery with a first half touchdown, and that was one of the momentum swingers for the Lions to just keep building off of. So you said it, the Lions, great team, good to watch. A lot of things happening for Detroit right now, but other than that, are there any props or angles for either the Lions or the Seahawks that you encourage fans to kind of navigate and gauge from here on out as we continue to roll through this NFL season?
I mean, Kenneth Walker comes back. He doesn't see necessarily a ton of volume with only 12 carries, but, 3 touchdowns is unbelievable. And it's just so clear. And, maybe you could say one of those he shouldn't have. DK was down at the 1 in the first half. That long pass he was ruled down at the 1. So, but man, Kenneth Walker, if he's healthy, he's going to be that guy carrying the ball. I like Zach Charbonnet just like at a personal level. I think he's a good player. I think he should be more involved. But Walker is that guy, and ultimately over on yards, over on attempts are going to be one of the consistent things for Ken Walker. I was big on JSN, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, saying he's going to get his first touchdown of the season. That didn't happen. He finished with 11 targets, which was the second highest on the team behind DK Metcalf. I said coming to the game, he was tied with for the team lead. Team lead when it comes to receptions. He had the second highest target share on the team, which is exactly what we saw tonight. He just didn't get a touchdown. So I will be back on JSN in the coming weeks for a touchdown because he's so highly involved in the offense. He is going to find the end zone. It didn't happen tonight. It will happen.
Yeah, and you pointed out his ability to contribute to this roster in the pregame show as well, so something else to navigate. Quick question, though, because you do also make a good case for like when quarterbacks should just be looked at for attempts versus completions versus their passing yards. Geno Smith's done tremendous with airing out the ball, and he was able to still pick up 395 passing yards tonight. I mean, are you kidding me? He gets near to 400 passing yards regardless of the result of his team. So with that being said, had the 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio still, but 38 for 56. I mean, what's the angle with going with Geno Smith and giving him some respect for his props?
Let me just check his. All right, so the upcoming schedule then would be Giants, 49ers, Falcons. They should be able to control things with the Giants. If Geno Smith has to throw the ball 45 or 50 times like he did against the Giants, that's probably a problem for them, like something went wrong against the Giants. So next week for Seattle is probably a Ken Walker week. We can look to trust him, but Geno's been great to start the season. Like we said, we had some questions about, they didn't play anyone yet. We kind of saw that on display tonight, but I'm going to say all systems still go for Seattle. Even with this loss, they're still in a good spot.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think that he has the potential to continue to air out the ball, at least versus two of the three teams that you have just mentioned. And it's nice to see Geno continue to find success. I mean, he learned a lot of things when he first transitioned over to the Seahawks, and I think that he's been able to carry and continue the momentum in that asset. I think we'll continue to see more out of Walker. I didn't expect him to be the 3-tutty guy tonight, but that just shows you that not only is he feeling better, at least to the most of his ability, but he wants to contribute to the success of the Seahawks, and we'll see how they continue to rise to the occasion. We got more to get into and especially start previewing what's coming up on this Sunday slate and Thursday night football, so go nowhere. Stick with us on the other side of this quick break.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
Crew has already clinched the National League Central. They're 2 games behind LA, that being the Dodgers, trying to maybe get the 2nd seed in the National League standings for October.
Both of these teams have a chance to score some runs against these pitching matchups, so maybe another over, even though we do have a playoff atmosphere. And yes, Milwaukee did clinch, but there's still an eye on the prize of we might be able to chase down the Dodgers and also the Phillies to get one of those buys.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Brian Dable has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Dable to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get Neighbors, and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
You are watching Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio, running through the doubleheader on this Monday night. We already talked about what went down, Titans versus Dolphins, the gloom and doom that could potentially be the Dolphins, yet Schaefer mentions that we could potentially see Tua back around Week 8. So we will see what the future holds come for South Florida. Outside of that, we see the Lions continue to roll, winning 42-29 over the Seahawks, but not a bad play by the Seahawks. It's time for us to look ahead, though. You guys know where to find the party. That's on Thursday. Pro Football Today, the pregame party. Kasey, Tom, Dave, and Adam. We're going to get you guys ready for the Tampa Bay Bucks taking on the Atlanta Falcons, a nice in-division head-to-header. So let's go ahead and start there when it comes to the previews. We've got some new information out so that we can gauge the best way to approach this game. I'm going to not be biased, I promise, guys, but I'm going to let Tom take the reins on this one. For starters, what do we see for the Thursday Night Football showdown that we've got coming up in a few days?
Yeah, so props came out. We obviously did a very quick preview of this game last night. Props came out today, starting to dig into them. And let's just keep it really simple. Chris Godwin for a touchdown at plus 170. In comparison, Mike Evans is plus 135 for a touchdown. We've seen Rachaad White drop down to plus 190 for a touchdown, and he's the same as Buck Irving at plus 190. So Chris Godwin leads the team with a 30.9 target share. He is the number one guy in the Bucks passing offense, and he's sitting at plus 170. Yeah, sign me up for that any single day. Now, we also have talked about that the Falcons offense is improving. Their Falcons defense is improving. We've talked about that. It's also a Thursday night game with a relatively modest, was it 42.5 over-under? So we're not expecting a massive amount of scoring in this game. But, again, we have a player who is the most targeted player in an offense, and he's sitting at plus 170. That is a great number to be starting off with. So that's where I want to go. 6.5 receptions for Godwin might be a tad too much if he finished with 50, 75 yards and 1 touchdown. I think that could be a little bit realistic. So over 6.5 receptions might be a tad much for me, but I love his touchdown prop.
Yes, I'm with you on the touchdown prop, and then right now I'm seeing his yardage coming in at over under 65.5. This might feel a little nerve-wracking. I've talked about it with you before, Tom. He kind of sits at that 50 to 60 mark depending on what the game plan or the ability is of the Tampa Bay Bucs. You're going against the Falcons defense. It's actually been pretty decent on defense for starters, but when it comes to what Chris Godwin has specifically done versus the Falcons, let's just say this. Of 13 matchups, he's had 4 over 100 plus yard reception or 100 plus yard games. On top of that, the minimum play that he's had has been 3 times where he has barely hit 62 yards. So outside of that, his average is roughly sitting anywhere between 60 to 70 yards when he plays versus the Falcons. So maybe something to keep in mind if you're trepidatious versus that 65.5. Maybe take alt yards of 60 plus, because that's probably where I'm leaning for Thursday. But I do like the touchdown prop. Any love for the Falcons and what they'll produce on this end? Because I know that there's a guy that's not as involved as a lot of people thought they were going to be, but everyone wants to just see more and more and more and more of London.
Yeah, there are no receiving props for the Falcons posted yet. I'm only seeing Evans, Godwin, and Otten for the Bucs. So when it comes to the Falcons, I think they would start things off with Bijan Robinson as being like the focal point of their offense. That's where it should be. We saw Saquon have a big game against the Bucs defense the other day. Granted, he had to have a big game just because the Eagles were so shorthanded. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Robinson props be very, very popular. But when it comes to receiving, Kyle Pitts is basically playing no role for the Falcons in their passing offense. It should be Drake London. This is when we turn to Darnell Mooney as a potential second option, especially if we do see the Bucs get out ahead. And again, we're going to discuss all of this on the Thursday night pregame show. I can almost guarantee that Chris Godwin will be one of my main talking points for the show. He'll probably be in my SGP. But again, I always approach these where I'm building a game script, just as I did tonight when I spoke about Jameson Williams, where I'm saying he is the downfield threat. He's going to get the ball downfield. He's going to pile up these yards. He's going to score, and it's going to help the Lions win. That's the narrative that I build. So when I'm building essentially a narrative for Thursday, if I think the Bucs will get out and score, someone else is going to have to answer on the Falcons side of things. And it might come down to maybe Ray McLeod, maybe Darnell Mooney, some of the secondary options. Not saying I don't like Drake London. I think Drake London is awesome. I have some season-long props on him. I just think his numbers are often very, very refined and very accurate, and I like to look for some of the secondary options where we can find a little bit of wiggle room. And it honestly might be unders on Kyle Pitts, over on Darnell Mooney, maybe over combined on Robinson as well.
Yeah, I actually really appreciate the fact that you look at these secondary guys, because they do come in strong, especially in close matchups. Not to mention, as we've seen Moody go off for the Falcons before and help them secure wins that they needed to get under their belt. So Moody's probably a great guy to take a gander at when it comes to the Thursday night matchup. We do have passing props for these quarterbacks. 240.5 for Baker Mayfield, 226, and a half when it comes to Kirk Cousins. I found this to be a little interesting, especially to have Baker going over, because I couldn't imagine if they would want to try to utilize their run game a little bit more, get that active. They didn't feel like it was as active in the previous week. So is this a high number for Baker, or can you see it happening?
Honestly, it's Monday night, so we have time to dig into all this, but ultimately, if I'm interested in Baker over 240, I would probably want to also have a play about the Bucs team total or over on the game overall. Because if he's having to pass for 260, that means the Falcons are probably scoring, so he needs to be in a passing spot. So there would be back and forth scoring. So I would want to ultimately pair it with something, which, again, I've discussed in the show plenty of times. I like to have a lot of things correlated. So if I'm thinking about Baker over, I'm probably thinking about the Bucs team total over as well. So that's just my initial lean as of now on Monday night at 11:50, but maybe I can get there. I have much more interest, as you said, in the running game, specifically with Bucky Irving.
Yeah, that's where I figured you were leaning of it, but I love the foundation of it, and like you said, correlation. We'll get back to this on the other side of the break coming up, but under a minute, we're going to start talking about Jets versus Vikings. Jets fall short to the Broncos this past Sunday. You got the Vikings that are continuing to roll and showing that they're out there to compete. Initial thoughts on this before we cut to the break?
Adam was talking heavily about Aaron Jones last week, and he said that players generally score the week after. So I like Aaron Jones. I think Aaron Jones, we should note that this game is in London, just to be clear. It's a Sunday morning game, 9 a.m., 9:15 start, whatever is in London. I think Aaron Jones continues to be the play, and Sam Darnold over on completions, maybe not attempts, but Sam Darnold in a revenge game against his former team.
Okay. I like when you and Adam come up with these things to keep an eye on. So look out for Aaron Jones and that touchdown prop. We got more to get to in this game in London, 9:30 a.m., but stick with us as we go to a quick break here on SportsGrid TV.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoff.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
Brew Crew has already clinched the National League Central. They're 2 games behind LA, that being the Dodgers, trying to maybe get the 2nd seed in the National League standings for October.
Both of these teams have a chance to score some runs against these pitching matchups, so maybe another over, even though we do have a playoff atmosphere. And yes, Milwaukee did clinch, but there's still an eye on the prize of we might be able to chase down the Dodgers and also the Phillies to get one of those buys.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Brian Dable has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Dable to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get Neighbors, and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Back at it with Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio. We got one more round to go with you all football fans. So let's get right back into it. We're talking about the Jets versus the Vikings. Adam and Tom had a discussion about keeping an eye on Aaron Jones finding the end zone, but that's going to be a London game at 9:30, so mark your calendars. But let's get to a bigger matchup. We got the Ravens taking on the Bengals, Tom, and I need you to give us a breakdown on this one. 2.5 spread, 50.5 total. Where are you leaning?
This is a massive, massive game in the AFC and the AFC North. The Bengals are currently plus 330 to win the division. The Ravens are sitting at minus 125. Super close spread as you'd expect for 2 division rivals, 2 good teams. 50.5 over under. I immediately lean on the under. I think this is too many points. We've seen great offense from both of these teams, especially over the past 2 weeks. Bengals putting up 30-plus points in back-to-back games. We know their defense is not good, but if they can't get it done here, then the Ravens are going to be running away with this division. I just don't have any faith in the Steelers. So ultimately, if you have interest in the Bengals coming back at any point, like we should be betting them before the game. Not saying I love the Bengals, but the play would be to bet them before this inflection point. And that's what this is. This is an inflection point for the AFC North. So I like the under. And then, take your position on teams' futures. I would ultimately continue to look to Derrick Henry, just piling up the yards on the ground, Joe Burrow in the air, something along those lines. I think it should be an awesome game, one of the best, but I'm not expecting a ton of points.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a great game. I think Henry's going to continue to anchor in the way that he's predicted to, but after the way that the Bengals hung in there with the Chiefs, they're going to make this game even more interesting as long as they can keep everything together. Jamar Chase is starting to feel better about himself and his role, so that kind of confidence can create some issues in an exciting way. Good football, all in all. As for a team that's trying to pull things together after falling short this past weekend, you got the Bills taking on the Texans. Texans with a semi-narrow escape to a Jaguars team that's just, well, God knows right now. And then the Bills, who Josh Allen got a little shaken up. They lost a few players due to injuries. Nothing too massive at this point, but what do you see in this matchup?
I would have to assume, and I assume the conversation will develop throughout the week, that Buffalo is going to be a favorite pick for so many people. You take Buffalo with the points. How often are we getting Buffalo, besides last week against the Ravens? But we very rarely get Buffalo with points. You very rarely get them at plus money on the money line. They're sitting at plus 102 now. I assume that will change come Sunday. But this is another big game in the AFC. And yeah, they got a little bit banged up, but this is a chance for the Bills to rebound. And we got to look at this from the Texans' perspective as well. Like, if they're barely beating the Jaguars, who we know are an inferior team compared to basically everyone, the Bills should be able to bounce back and take care of business in this game. So I'm saying that's the perspective I think a lot of people have. Oh, they can barely beat the Jaguars. The Bills should be able to win this game. So I assume the Bills will be popular. I'm expecting another good amount of offense in this game. 46.5, I think, is very accurate. I would be most interested if this game actually starts off tight. These teams kind of want to feel each other out. The live total then drops to 41, 42, then taking the over on that. So I'm a little hesitant to take the 46, but I would prefer to take the live. And then it's going to be a big Josh Allen game. The note is that Khalil Shakir for the Bills got a little bit banged up. We've talked about the Bills passing game over the first few weeks. If he's not good to go, there's a big void because Khalil Shakir has proven to be the number one target for Josh Allen. If he is out, that means it should be a big game for Dalton Kincaid, and maybe Keon Coleman can step up for the Bills. And then for the Texans, they've been 2 games without Joe Mixon in the backfield, and we did not see Tank Dell play. So it could be another huge game for Nico Collins, who looks amazing for the Texans right now. And then, of course, Steph Diggs going up against his former team, revenge game. Let's get Steph Diggs into the end zone.
Oh, I would love for Steph Diggs to get the end zone. But I do want to touch back to Collins for 2 seconds because he's been so consistent in racking up those 100-plus yard performances. Is that something that's worth gauging and probably putting money on because he's so consistent with it?
Yeah, I assume his prop's going to be at high 70s, low 80s. That's where it should be. So, laddering him up to 100, not just him, but like receivers of his caliber, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, et cetera, et cetera. If they're at 80 or 85, I always put a little sprinkle on 100 plus because if they can get to 80, I expect them to be able to get to 100 or just have the faith that they can get to 100.
Absolutely. And with the chemistry that he's building with Stroud and the reliability that Stroud now has on him, I think that he can hit 100 plus yet again. So injuries on both sides, but either way, it's going to come down to strategic game planning and gamers. So I'm excited to see what the revenge plot is for Diggs. But as for tonight on Pro Football Today, the post-game show, that's a wrap for Tom and myself. Thank you all for joining us top to bottom here on SportsGrid TV. But don't forget, the party comes back on Thursday to prepare for Thursday Night Football here on SportsGrid. So we will see you for Pro Football Today, the pregame show on Thursday. See you guys coming up here in a few days.